Biden plans the first major tax hike in history. The Vatican finally takes a hard stance on gay marriage, and the Army goes woke. I'm William Hall, and this is The William Hall Show. All right, welcome back to the show. I hope everyone had a great weekend. So getting right into this, white farmers are now claiming that $5 billion of aid that was promised to minority farmers, and this is all a part of Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, is considered as discrimination. The reason why they're saying this is because that's exactly what it is. They're basically giving a large portion of money only to minority farmers. Anyone else of any other race is not going to be able to get that money. And this is all a part of the COVID relief thing as well. Now, what they're basically showing here, that this is a part of the Relief for Farmers of Color Act. So it literally says that in the name. And this is being criticized by the former lieutenant governor of New York, who's claiming that the Empire State's majority white farmers were being discriminated against. Which makes, of course, a lot of sense, because what you're basically telling people is that they aren't entitled to this money unless they are a minority. Now, they're assuming that, okay, minority farmers are maybe a little bit more in debt, which is already kind of racist right there. But instead of saying, we're going to actually help out everyone, they're only giving this aid to people of a certain color. That's the way that they're basically trying to do this. So, once again, why not help out the small farmers, all the small farmers instead? But in this situation, they're only willing to help out the ones that fit into the kind of niche that they're looking for, the ones that fit a certain race in this case. Now, they're saying that this is reparations, which is absolutely ridiculous, because that's not what this is. This is just pure discrimination and racism, because at least with the reparations, which of course I don't support, but at least in that situation, you're telling people, well, we'll give you some money to help you out in a certain situation to basically try to make up for some past ills that we had in the past with slavery. In this situation, you're literally just saying, you know what, it looks like you guys are disadvantaged, so we're only going to give money to minorities. Anyone else, white or otherwise, is not going to be able to get this money at all. Therefore, they can continue to suffer. This whole package was about basically allowing these farmers to pay off their bills. All farmers are hurting right now due to COVID-19 and the rest. Due to the lockdowns, all of that. Everybody's struggling right now. So the fact that this is a significant amount of money that is excluding a group is considered as discrimination. That's plain and simply what it is. But once again, just more things underneath this COVID relief package that we're finding out about later. That, of course, it's too late. It's already been signed now, so the money's going to go where it's going to go. But just more things that are being added in to this bill, where a lot of people are getting money. And these things are just filling in these left-wing ideology type things, the things that have really not much to do with specific aid for the coronavirus, but just specifically trying to adhere to certain racial guidelines that are set up in the Biden administration. So, speaking of what Biden's doing, there's another report that's coming out now saying that he's planning a major federal tax hike. Now, if this is true, if this goes into play, in the plan, they're talking about this being the biggest tax hike in 30 years. So, key advisors are now making preparations for a package of measures that would include an increase in both the corporate tax rate and the individual tax rate for high earners. Now, this is going to basically raise the corporate tax rate to 28% from 21% under Trump. Now, they're also looking at raising the income tax rate on individuals earning more than $400,000 a year. Okay, now of course, I think on its face, most people hear that and they're like, okay, well, I'm not making that much money, so I'm good, right? In essence, yes, but not for long. Because the problem is that when you start raising the tax rate, number one on corporations, that does affect you immediately, because corporations are going to make that money up some way. Okay, some way, somehow, they're going to make that up. That's going to probably be in the cost of goods. Same thing that minimum wage was going to do when you try to tax or hike that up really high. Anything that costs a company more money means that you're going to pay less money, or you're going to want to pay more money for the same goods that you were previously paying less money for. That's the way that these things always work. So what we're also looking at here is people that are making more than $400,000 a year are oftentimes people that are employing many other people as well. So when you start to raise the tax rates on them, you get into this area where you don't want to be somebody that's making a decent amount of money in the United States. So people tend to do what they need to do to stay underneath that tax bracket or find loopholes to try and get around paying taxes like this. But that's the issue that you're going to wind up running into, is that you're only hurting these people, and then eventually these taxes will eventually trickle down to you and me. That's the way that this always works, because everybody in the bracket is going to go up. And what they're going to wind up doing is eliminating the middle class entirely. This is just the kind of tip of the iceberg when we're talking about tax rates and things like that. It always sounds fun at first until it hits everybody. And then all of a sudden we realize how bad of an idea it was to do it in the first place. So now under Biden so far, we have gas prices going up, in case you have not realized yet. We have food prices going up. And now we're getting our taxes going up along with that. This is exactly what people were warning about before this election even took place. Biden is going to do everything in his power to go along with the regular old radical left agenda in raising the prices, raising the cost of living. Everything is going to go up in price while maintaining and or at least promising this and maintaining this message of we're helping the people out, right? We're giving you these things that you need. Meanwhile, don't pay attention to these taxes over here. Don't pay attention to your gas over here. You know, it's been really nice for 4 years not to have that conversation about the gas prices being really high. I think people just take things like that for granted so much because we sit here and for the past 4 years, no one's talked about how high gas prices are. Literally. Do you remember the last time somebody talked about how high gas prices were? I mean, that conversation used to happen all the time before Trump. I think we're going to get into another era where that happens again. Once again, these are costs that affect all of us even more than we would like to admit because we have to get gas. It's a necessary thing. And oftentimes we take these things for granted and we forget exactly how good we had it under somebody who at least understood how the economy worked, unlike Biden in this particular situation. So speaking of Trump a little bit, the Washington Post actually retracted a massive story that was falsely claiming that Trump was pressuring Georgia to find the votes. Now, this was a report, once again, from I think about 3 months ago, where they were basically saying that there was some call that Trump had with someone in Georgia, one of the officials there, and they were trying to make it seem as if he had told them to find votes where there weren't any. Just find enough votes for me to win is basically what they were trying to pin it as being. Well, they're retracting that, of course. And their correction says, 2 months after publication of this story, the Georgia Secretary of State released an audio recording of President Trump's December phone call with the state's top elections investigator. The recording revealed that the Post misquoted Trump's comments on the call based on information provided by a source. Trump did not tell the investigator to find the fraud or say she would be a national hero if she did so. Instead, Trump urged the investigator to scrutinize ballots in Fulton County, Georgia, asserting she would find dishonesty there. He also told her that she had the most important job in the country right now. A story about the recording can be found on the site for Washington Post as well, talking about all of that. So the point is that this story was literally passed as 100% fact. Initially, that's what it was. They literally said, this is what Trump did. This is what Trump did. And nobody reads in the articles anyways, 90% of the time. So a lot of people just saw this and they said, okay, well, Trump must have said these things. But no one ever looked in there and saw that, oh, well, this is just their kind of the hearsay thing that we deal with oftentimes in the news, where they heard someone say something and maybe they changed it around a little bit to fit their narrative. But it was only there to basically make Trump look bad. That's basically what's going on. So the headline now reads that Trump pressured a Georgia elections investigator in a separate call. Legal experts could amount to obstruction. The original one was find the fraud, in quotes. Trump pressured a Georgia elections investigator in a separate call. Legal experts say would be or could amount to obstruction. So basically, once again, they had to change the actual title, the headline, and add that kind of annotation at the bottom after the article. Of course, it doesn't matter now, does it? The hit piece did its job. It made Trump look bad. It made Trump look like he was trying to somehow cheat in this situation. It's too late. Election's over. Situation's done. I mean, there's no point, right? I mean, that's basically what's going on. But you once again just have to understand that I guess the biggest takeaway here is that the mainstream media will warp any story to fit its narrative. It doesn't matter whether it's some guy that comes to them and says, well, I heard this, or a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend said this. They're going to just basically treat it as facts. As long as they like the outcome or like the general message that Trump's bad, they'll push it no matter what and pretend as if it's fact. By the time the retractions come, by the time things change, it's too late. The damage has already been done. The Vatican declared on Monday that the Catholic Church cannot stand for gay marriage. That's basically what they're doing. They're talking about the fact that they can't bless a gay union. Now, the Vatican has already been a bit liberal in my opinion anyways, okay? They automatically are kind of saying, well, we see some benefits to gay marriage. Like, literally, that's in there. But the crazy thing right now is that they're actually taking a stance, which is a good thing, obviously. They're, just basically saying, look, it does not align with what's in the Bible, plain and simple. But remember, who claims that they're a devout Catholic yet does not kind of side with any of the actual things that would make you even religious whatsoever? And that would be, of course, Joe Biden, which has repeatedly said, well, he's a devout Catholic, even though, once again, his positions don't show that. Now, Jen Psaki, his press secretary, actually did a recent press event, basically where she was actually questioned by one of the reporters about this new finding or new statement from the Vatican.
Downturn.
On a different subject, the Vatican today said it would not bless same-sex unions. The president's a devout Catholic. Does he have a personal response to that?
I don't think he has a personal response to the Vatican, no. He continues to believe and support same-sex unions, as you know, and he's long had that position.
And in her typical fashion of circling back and turning it around and not really answering the question at all, she basically dodges the question and then says, well, he supported it for a long time. Well, how long is she talking about? Because he actually has not supported it for a long time whatsoever. So lucky for us, the internet is forever. And here's Joe Biden making statements about just 12 years ago on this exact topic.
The president used his radio address yesterday and tomorrow in the Rose Garden to talk about a constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage.
And we're going to debate the next 3 weeks, I'm told, gay marriage, a flag amendment, and God only knows what else. I can't believe the American people can't see through this. We already have a law, the Defense of Marriage Act, where we've all voted, not where I voted and others said, look, marriage is between a man and a woman, and states must respect that. Nobody's violated that law. There's been no challenge to that law. Why do we need a constitutional amendment? Marriage is between a man and a woman. What's the game going on here?
Do you support gay marriage?
No. Barack Obama nor I support redefining from a civil side what constitutes marriage. We do not support that.
All right, so honestly, I would be completely surprised if Biden even remembered saying that, making any of those statements from back in the day. Because where he's at right now is that, once again, this progressivism, this idea of constantly needing to move forward in every way possible, has once again shown that these people flip on a dime. It just takes the right situation and everything will just flip entirely. Their position of 10 years ago is not the way they are today. And likewise, the Democrat of 10 years ago is not the kind of Democrat that we have today. Their party has completely left where it was just 10 years ago. This kind of stuff ought to make you realize that it's only the conservatives that are kind of pulling back and trying to maintain our way of life that's worked for so long. But it's the progressives that are literally just every day, it's something new, it's something new, it's something new, it's something new. The conversations we're having today are not the conversations of 5 years ago. They're not the conversations of 10 years ago. And you see these politicians just oftentimes just adapt. I'm sure at one point, Joe Biden probably was an actual devout Catholic. But the problem is that when you want to be a Democrat and you're in their party and they're telling you all of these new things that you need to just say, yes, it's fine to, now all of a sudden you find yourself in a position where it no longer lines up with your religious views. So you just pretend as if you can tread the line and do both. Well, unfortunately, you can't do both because it's stuff like this that degrades away from what it means to believe in God. It's people look to Joe Biden and they're thinking that this guy is somewhat religious aren't paying attention to what's actually going on here. This guy has nothing to do with that at all. And you can clearly see the shift now. And I don't know if you also noticed in that clip, but it doesn't almost even really sound like Joe Biden. I mean, that just 10 years ago almost doesn't even sound like him. And everybody wants to say it was his, it was him having stuttering issues and he just had problems and, we don't need to say anything about it. Well, there he was 10 years ago being completely coherent, being completely able to speak without any problems whatsoever. So what's his excuse exactly? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The thing is that 10 years and age has clearly worn this guy down, and it's very, very obvious when you look back at some of these old clips as well. So before I get into the next story, just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon where you can donate directly to the show as well. And if you're listening to this on any of the podcast networks, just a quick reminder to leave a review as it does help the show out. Tucker Carlson came under fire recently when he was talking about pregnant women in the Army. Now we have to back up a little bit because this situation is a bit weird. So first of all, here's a clip of Tucker basically offering his opinion on this subject.
Nothing matters more than what Joe Biden does to our U.S. military. Our military is the last functional institution of any size in this country. It's the last institution most people trust and respect. It is by far the most important. A weak military means no country, period. So on Monday, when we saw Joe Biden pledge to bring a, quote, intensity of purpose and mission to really change the culture and habits of the U.S. military, we paid attention to it. Here's what Biden said.
Some of it's relatively straightforward work, where we're making good progress designing body armor that fits women properly, tailoring combat uniforms for women, creating maternity flight suits, updating requirements for their hairstyles.
Creating maternity flight suits. Maybe those suits have been around for a while. We'd never heard of them. But here was the President of the United States promoting them at a press conference. And that phrase stuck out, not because we have some hateful bias against pregnant women flying military jets. We're pro-pregnancy, as we often say. We're also open-minded. Maybe pregnant women make the best pilots. The Department of Defense measures everything, so there's got to be extensive research on this question. If the Pentagon can show that pregnant pilots are the best, we will be the first to demand an entire Air Force of pregnant pilots. The problem is we're pretty confident that Joe Biden hasn't asked to see those numbers. We'd bet money that Joe Biden never even thought to ask. The rest of us depend on the U.S. military to protect our families and protect the country itself. But Joe Biden doesn't see it that way. Finding the most effective military pilots or infantry officers or SEAL teams is not his priority. It's not even close to his priority. Identity politics is Joe Biden's priority. It's all that matters.
This is when identity politics has some serious problems, specifically when it comes down to you and me, because it's no longer some philosophical thing. Now we're actually talking about the protection of our border, the protection of our country. And it started with men infiltrating women's sports. Now they're basically saying, well, women can do whatever men do, even if they're pregnant. And they can defend this country, and it's morally right to let them do that. That's where we're at right now. So a sergeant here on Twitter decided to be woke. He decided that he was going to take the moral high ground here and basically tell Tucker exactly what his opinion of this entire situation is.
Drama TV. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what I call it. I'll apologize up front and tell you that I don't have cable news at home. I don't have it here in the office, and I don't watch a lot of drama TV. I understand some comments were made yesterday, and I watched the clip that Mr. Carlson produced as he referred to pregnant women in the military. I'll remind everyone that his opinion, which he has a right to, is based off of actually 0 days of service in the armed forces. Let me offer you my opinion. My opinion is based off of 28 years of actual service in the military, 28 years in the Marine Corps, in combat operations out at sea and in garrison. And so he was talking specifically about pregnant women in the armed forces today and how it makes us less lethal and less fit and less ready. Let me tell you where he's wrong. Those decisions were made by medical professionals, by commanders, and our civilian leadership that allows for women to have more time with their children, to recuperate, to get fit and ready to take that time that's necessary, that our medical professionals know is needed, which actually makes us a more lethal and ready and fit force, ready to fight the wars of today and the wars of tomorrow. The bottom line is that we value women in our armed forces. We value those that have served in the past, and we value those that have served today. We value our families in the military. I want to say God bless everyone that is serving today. God bless the women that are serving today. God bless the men and women that are serving today. God bless our country, our partners, and our allies. Let's get back to work. Let's remember that those opinions were made by an individual who has never served a day in his life. Let's remember that's all about drama TV. God bless America. Semper Fidelis.
It really bothers me when people have to misrepresent the argument of someone else in order to make their argument valid. So you saw the clip from Tucker Carlson. He didn't say anything bad about women serving in the military, believe it or not. He took issue with the fact that you shouldn't be sending pregnant women with unborn children into active live fire combat zones. That's a bad idea. I don't understand how people are perfectly fine with this. That doesn't sound like a very good idea as far as it goes for protecting the country, not only for the women that are involved in it, but also just ethically as well. It's not safe for the baby. I guess this just kind of goes right in line with the rest of what the left believes, that there's nothing inside the womb when they're actually pregnant in the first place, that it's not really alive. That's what they believe. So I guess it kind of goes in line with that. But either way, it's not good to do that. And you can't expect women that are pregnant to be able to do the same physical types of things that other men or just normal women would be able to do. So, yet this guy is going to bash Tucker for not having served on the basis for his ideas being wrong. I don't think people understand how dangerous that is. Because basically what you have is a military person, or just a military person, basically saying, because you haven't served, you don't get to have an opinion on it. Okay, well, let's take 90% of the people that are in politics today. 90% of the people that are in politics today that are also the ones that are typically determining what the military does have not served, by the way, folks. So are they not able to tell you what to do because you're in the military? Look, at the end of the day, the point being with all of this is that this is exactly what the left loves to do with so many arguments. Think about it. They do it with the women argument. When they were talking about the wage gap for women, of course, which is a complete myth that they can't prove. But when they bring that up and a man says, hey, that doesn't exist, here's the statistics showing that it doesn't exist, then they'll say, until you're a woman, you don't get to comment on this. It's this immediate shutdown. It's this immediate just trying to discredit somebody just because they didn't fill some specific role or check some specific box that you had. And the problem is with that kind of thing is that you basically limit the discussions down. I mean, would it really matter to this guy if somebody that was in the military felt the same way that Tucker did? I highly doubt it. But this is what you have the left doing. You can't comment on this unless you are this. You can't comment on this unless you are identified this way. That means you don't get to comment on this thing. Well, obviously that doesn't make sense. First of all, the military is supposed to be apolitical. Okay, in other words, they don't get involved in the particular presidency or who's saying what, or especially somebody like Tucker Carlson, who's just a political commentator on a news network. That's not what they're supposed to be talking about or dealing with. Keep in mind that these tweets, that video there was posted to the official government account of one of that actual military account on Twitter. So this is not like it's his personal Twitter. I mean, you might as well just put this out on your work email or put it out on your work Twitter. This kind of stuff should not be allowed to happen. And here's another tweet that I have a picture posted here, where you have another guy, and this is from the MEF Information Group, another official account from the government military, where they're saying, come back when you've served and have been pregnant. So now we just keep adding stuff to the list, of course. Once again, I'm tired of the left-wing people making these types of arguments. These aren't arguments. That's not a rebuttal. You're not shooting them down. You're literally just saying, don't say anything. You're not allowed to comment unless you fill these boxes. And they'll just keep adding things to the list of things that you need to qualify for before you can apparently give your opinion. Oh, before you've been pregnant and this and that and served in this many years. Okay, 8 years, 10 years now. That's the problem that we're dealing with here. So the U.S. Marine Corps later walked back the post after taking heat for launching political attacks against a civilian and media figure. Once again, we're talking about Tucker here. So the unit, and this is a quote from them, the unit is currently reviewing their internal procedures for social media posts. While the post was intended to show support for women in the military, it was not executed according to the standards of decorum expected on the Marine Corps social media platforms. Look, honestly, even if they were going to make a post about showing support for women, this is not their place. It's not their place to do this. Because the reason why they're doing it is that it's in response to somebody on Fox News. Why are they making comments about this in the first place? This has nothing to do with them. Yet they're, for some reason, trying to pretend as if this is the case. And the reason why Tucker is concerned, and I think everybody should be concerned about this, is because we're talking about a military that, while we haven't really been paying much attention to it, has become a lot more woke. A lot more things have been taking place that are basically weakening the military because we soften things. We don't want people to get their feelings hurt. And as a result, it's not the strong force that it once was. So there's a report that came out recently that's talking about the U.S. Army, and it is considering reversing gender-neutral physical tests after a majority of women failed to keep up with men. So this is kind of right in line. Honestly, I'm surprised they haven't done this already. By the way, and I'll mention that a little bit later. So basically what they're doing, and this is the report, the United States Army is reportedly considering doing away with its new gender-neutral physical test after test results show that the majority of women failed, while approximately 90% of men actually passed. So officials are reportedly considering having different evaluation categories for men and women due to the physiological differences between the two. So I can't wait for this. The response from this one here. I mean, you can't bring up the fact that men and women have physiological differences. I mean, that's not possible, right? At least according to the left. They don't want to talk about this whatsoever. Because to them, men and women can achieve the exact same thing physically all the time, no matter what, and there's no discrepancy. So therefore, because there's no difference between men and women, you should be able to not have to change any of this. Well, that's obviously not the case because the real world says otherwise. And here you have them, of course, giving these different things that are going on here. So the report from last fall found that 54% of women failed the test, while only 7% of men failed the test. So a captain in the military, by the way, named Kristen Griest, says, and she's actually the Army's first female infantry officer, wrote last month that lowering fitness standards to accommodate women will hurt the Army and women. I mean, I completely agree. I completely agree with what she's saying. Number one, it's going to hurt the Army because what you're doing is that you're letting weaker people into the Army. That makes sense. But you're also hurting women because you're basically saying, you know what, we'll lower the standards for you to be able to get into this, to be able to do this thing. And you're only making it kind of less of a hurdle for women to get into the Army in the first place. You're basically saying, you know what, you don't need to achieve what men can achieve. You can achieve this lesser goal and do the same thing that they're doing. So it does hurt women in that way as well. She went on to say that implementing gender-based scoring or reducing the minimum standards for combat arms would have both immediate and insidious impacts on combat effectiveness as well as on women's credibility and potential. Like I said, she's right in line with what she's saying here. Here's my question. What happened to equality when we're looking at this whole story? I mean, the left will tell you that equality is this thing where everybody is able to do the same thing that anyone else can do. But what they forget, what they leave off, is how they go about trying to achieve that. That's the problem. See, a meritocracy is equality. It's this idea that you earn your way to being able to do whatever it is. Now, for the longest period of time, conservatives have been for equality. I mean, we always have. There's never been a situation where we weren't for equality. But the issue is that you have a lot of these people that are trying to change these rules and they're doing it in an incorrect way. So before I get into a little bit more of that, they go on to basically say the entire purpose of creating a gender-neutral test was to acknowledge the reality that each job has objective physical standards to which all soldiers should be held. Of course, correct. Everybody needs to be on the same playing field of expectations. So she goes on to say that the intent was not to ensure that women and men will have an equal likelihood of meeting those standards. Rather, it is incumbent upon women who volunteer for the combat arms profession to ensure they are fully capable and qualified for it. To not require women to meet equal standards in combat arms will not only undermine their credibility, but also place those women, their teammates, and the mission at risk. So let's take a portion of what she's talking about here. She says, the intent was not to ensure that women and men will have an equal likelihood of meeting those standards. See, here's what we're talking about here. This is what conservatives have been talking about for a while now. It's what I've been talking about for a while now. Conservatives, common sense people, we want equal opportunity. What the left wants is equal outcome. So what do these things mean? Because this is fundamental to understanding the difference between the type of equality that conservatives are for and the type of equality that a lot of Democrats are wanting. So the actual conservatism or the actual equality that conservatives are for is basically saying everyone has an opportunity to do X, to say in this situation, get into the army. Here's the test. Everybody's going to be tested equally. Men, women, black, white, whatever you are, everybody gets the same test. Everybody scored exactly the same. Everybody has the exact same expectations. That is the equality that conservatives are for. Because you are saying nobody gets an easy pass, nobody gets it harder than someone else. It's simply what it is. Here's the standard. This is where you need to be. And if you don't meet it, you fail. And if you meet it, you pass. Democrats do it in a completely different way. The way that they see equality is that, taking that example of this test that you need to pass to get into the army, is that they say, okay, well, there's this standardized test that everybody takes, but then they're looking at these percentages I just presented to you, where 54% of women are failing. And they say, oh, well, that's not good. We need to make sure that 90% of women are passing, just like 90% of men are passing. So what they'll basically do is they'll say, we'll reduce the guidelines or reduce the requirements for the test for women until they hit that number, until 90% of women get in. And then what they'll say at the end of it all is they'll say, okay, now that we reduced the requirements for women to get into the military, then they'll say it's equal, right? Because now we have 90% of women getting in and 90% of men getting in. Nobody gets an advantage. Nobody has a disadvantage or anything like that. Everybody's equal, right? That's what they'll say. But they won't mention the fact that women got it way easier. That women didn't have to work as hard to get there. That men have to achieve significantly higher physical requirements to get into this and to be able to achieve this. It's effectively what affirmative action has done in colleges. It's saying, oh, well, because you're black, we're just going to assume you're not educated. We're going to assume you're poor. We're going to assume you come from a bad family. So we're just going to make your requirements way lower. You can test lower on the SAT. That's not equality. It's equal outcome. It's basically them just trying to say, well, we're just going to try and equal out the percentages, right? It's like the kind of the quotas. We need an X certain amount of women in. We need an X certain amount of women or men in, and black men and white women and this generation, this person, this age group. That's the way they look at everything. Conservatives are simple. We just want a simple, plain, across the board meritocracy where there's a standard test to get in. That's what it is. And that's what this woman here is talking about. That women should be held to the same standard as anyone else. We're talking about defending the country. And what she's talking about here in this whole story, by the way, is already being done in police departments. Women literally have a different test and testing standard than men do in police departments. I mean, we can debate back and forth whether that's right, wrong, or the other. It doesn't matter. Like I said, none of this is about women not being able to play or do these things in the military or to be able to do these jobs. The point is that they should be allowed to do it as long as they meet the requirements to get there. If you earn it, you get there. That's the point. Instead of focusing on how many actually pass or fail or how well they do, the point is that everybody should be able to have the same exact opportunity. Not the exact same outcome. You can't guarantee that. You're going to always have to stifle the opportunity in order to give somebody else a better outcome. And that doesn't make sense. That's not how this works. That's unequal. It's actually inequality to do that. The numbers and percentages might be equal, but the difference between men and women and what they had to do to get there, that's not equal at all. Because plain and simple, you're going to have to score a higher test score on the SAT if you're white trying to go to one of these affirmative action schools. And you're going to have to perform a lot better on these physical tests if you're a man trying to get into the military. And that's if these things, of course, go through. So this isn't limited to a particular topic. It's not limited to the government. It's a much bigger thing than that. It's literally what the left uses to determine who's advantaged and who's disadvantaged in their way of thinking. The left sees those percentages, and they always are going to try and figure out how to change that, manipulate it, so that they can all be equal in that sense. So with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Fairly short news day and news weekend, I guess. But I thank you for watching the show, and I will see you on the next one. You just watched an episode from The William Hall Show. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.